In the year 2000, Cincinnati police figures show that 80,000 citations or summons were issued by the department. In an officer-by-officer breakdown, you can see that there are some clear cases of disproportion. We found one officer responsible for Over the Rhine had written 124 citations in that year. 123 of them went to African Americans. Only one went to a white driver. What is perhaps more surprising is that even in an overwhelmingly white suburb of Cincinnati, well over 3/4 of all citations went to black drivers. In fact, the percentage of all citations which went to African Americans in year 2000 was 85%. The black population of Cincinnati measures 43%. The sense of being treated differently because they are black is not confined to the poor and the young.
What I uncovered in the course of my work were stories upon stories upon stories of people who are upright, upstanding citizens who have had this same kind of experience. Often these stories were of people who were prominent in their own communities, who were examples to the people around them for the way they lived and the things they had achieved. And what many of them said over and over was, you know, I thought I had made something of myself in my life. I thought my education counted for something, and my professional position meant that I was a respected person. And it only took one encounter with the police to teach me that I was no different than any other black person or brown person in their eyes.
Often, the reason given for stop and search is the high-profile war on drugs, which has been waged in the United States for the past 2 decades. Throughout the country, crime figures show that racial minorities have been disproportionately arrested and jailed for drug and weapons crimes.
I think it's worth asking the question of whether the justification given is actually true. Is it true that African Americans and Latinos are imprisoned at higher rates than whites? Is it true that they are arrested at higher rates than whites for many crimes? The answer to both questions is yes. Those are true facts. There's no point in running from facts. If we run from facts, especially as social scientists, we cannot come to the right answers.
What seems to be happening in Cincinnati and many other police districts throughout the United States is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Police officers, police chiefs will often say to me, the jails are full of African Americans and Latinos. They are disproportionately jailed. I know who I arrest. I look at the FBI arrest figures. We are arresting disproportionate numbers of those minorities. Therefore, the argument goes, it only makes sense. It only makes sense to concentrate more of our law enforcement activity and resources on those populations, because that's where we will find the bad guys. But what happens is, when we look at that and we use that to justify who we go out and stop the next day, we simply build the justification over again.
As more and more blacks and other racial minorities get stopped and searched and ultimately arrested and imprisoned, the figures seem to stack up against them.
Arrests and imprisonment do not measure criminal activity. That's the basic fallacy. Arrest numbers and imprisonment numbers measure law enforcement activity.
Meanwhile, African Americans live with the day-to-day reality that skin color is enough to make you a suspect in America.
The task for law enforcement is to move past using race or ethnic appearance as a potential crime predictor. That's where this whole thing has gotten us off the track and away from good, effective law enforcement. When we try to predict, we try to get ahead of the game, but if we use race that way, we have a devastating effect on a huge pool of innocent, law-abiding people without much by way of return.
The return this time was to file a lawsuit against the Cincinnati Police Department, alleging a pattern of racial profiling that goes back 30 years. The national bodies, the American Civil Liberties Union and the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People joined forces with the Black United Front to pursue the case. Even the lawyers could see the problems, though, of litigation in this field.
If you go down the path of litigation, then there's a winner and a loser. And you get a judicial order that orders the loser to do something. But if that something is more than objective acts, if it's a philosophy you want changed, if it's a way of relating to people that you want changed, you're off on the wrong foot, because you're dragging people to that new era of policing rather than working with them to get there. And that's what we were trying to avoid. We didn't want to spend the next 3 years deprogramming the police from their resentment of the battle.
A unique solution to the class action was instigated. A mediation process which was not to be confined to the parties in the class action itself. A mediator or special master was appointed by the court, charged with going beyond the settlement of individual cases. He was to tackle the underlying issues and perceptions and come up with an agreement that all sides could buy into.
It's quite clear, and it was very clear to the judge, that pursuing this process in an adversarial way would do only harm. Whoever won wouldn't win for long, because the loser would come back with anger or frustration, and the cycle would perpetuate and get deeper. The cycle of mistrust, the cycle of confrontation, and so forth. So the brief was to be more systemic, to look at the whole situation beyond, not excluding, but beyond or in addition to the statistics, the perceptions, the facts, however they may be painted.
The plan was to devote nearly a year to extensive interviews and follow-up negotiations about grievances and goals, with about 3,500 residents, blacks and whites, representing a cross-section of 8 major interests in the city. Once the background research was done, each one of these 8 groups was invited to an open face-to-face session with the mediators.
We asked them a simple set of questions. What are your goals for the future of police-community relations? Why do you care about those goals? And that why question is really the core of our work. The core of our work is value-driven. That is, who are we and what do we care about given who we are? Given our hopes and our fears, our hurts and our aspirations, why do we care about our goals? And then finally, how do we think those goals can concretely be accomplished?
Week after week, the different interest groups met in this church. As the defendants in the original class action, the police were from the beginning in a vulnerable position.
To be quite honest, the most difficult to get to the table were the police. And I have grown to understand and respect that difficulty as follows. The police are well-trained professionals who are constantly under siege. That's the definition of their job. When they're doing their job against criminals, they're not very liked. They're making decisions, split-second decisions that have to do with life and death. And the idea that outsiders are going to come in and tell them how to change, are going to demand of them that they do this or that, is something that I think understandably gets them very resistant.
There's a mindset here in Cincinnati and across the country that law enforcement police officers believe that we are the only ones that know what's best for the police. We know what's best for the community. And there's been this mindset and a mentality that has been pervasive across the country that says, community, you get in line for what we want you to do.
With the court case on hold, to give the collaborative process time to work, the police department did come to the table.
I think it was a good decision on the judge's part, because there can't be any change without dialogue. You know, both parties, both sides of the issue have to be at the table, and when we're in group settings and we have the opportunity to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, when I say that, I mean that you look at best practices across the nation and how do our policies and procedures compare. The only way you can get that information to your customers, and our citizens are our customers, is by dialoguing. You know, what do you expect, and how are we performing according to those expectations? And I think that the greatest problem that comes is when we don't dialogue with each other.